So it gives me really great pleasure to introduce Dr. Yoseph Araya. He's a senior lecturer in ecology and environmental sciences at the Open University, and he's going to be speaking to us about climate smart agroforestry in Malawi. Thank you very much, Yosef.
Thank you. Real pleasure to meet some familiar faces and new people. And I'm just going to start my talk. Today, what I'm going to talk to you about is about climate smart sustainable agroforestry, which is a short title for how smallholders are being empowered to tackle social and environmental challenges. And this is a case study which at the moment I am working with a charity called Nino Macadamia Trust in Malawi, and also a cooperative farm in Malawi of smallholder farmers, which has about 5,000 farmers. So the whole concept is about how we are addressing environmental, social, and economic challenges using agroforestry, which is a very old agricultural technology. And I would like to thank first my collaborators from Nano Macadamia Trust, and particularly also Ken Mkengala, who is the chair of the cooperative in Malawi. And Emmanuel Zuza is a PhD student between Open University and Malawi working with us. And Will Rose is the computer programmer who does our carbon damage mitigation certificate, which I will explain in a minute. So without further ado, to go to the general background, we have a large number of global grand challenges, and sometimes people call them as the wicked problems because they are complicated but yet essential for everyone at global level. For example, today's news is one which was talking about grain harvest and grain supply suffering from the war in Ukraine, and also we have constant messages about how changing climate is affecting people, agricultural production. And of course, there is the major challenge of biodiversity loss, which is, for example, could be changing land cover of forests, which can have an effect not only locally, but at global carbon levels as well. So we have quite a few big challenges, but one thing to notice is that these challenges are not separate. In fact, some writers have referred to them as the water, food, and energy nexus, as linking them all up with one affecting the other. And what once the UK science advisor said was the making of a perfect storm. Basically, they enhance and exacerbate each factor, which means it becomes incredibly difficult to handle and the consequences can be severe. So of this particular one, which is one of our essentials we talk about often, is food security, which is basically the fundamental essential for human beings. And we will be looking at who is affected and where and how. And also then we will look at how it is dependent on the environmental factors and, for example, biodiversity and water that are inputs to food. And it might appear far off, but energy itself is actually a big issue. In fact, we are dependent on mining, for example, to produce fertilizers, which are in high demand for food security. So there is a huge link with each other, even though sometimes it doesn't look apparent. But defining food security is critical because yeah, the UN has a definition for food security. Basically, food security means when all people, so we are taking global picture, have sufficient amount of food, safe, and in the right quality to meet their needs. And lastly, not to forget their preferences for an active and healthy life. So it goes beyond having a full stomach. It goes to having the right amount of nutrition. And also it goes to the right amount of preference. People don't necessarily want to be fed with something which is not fitting their cultural or personal choice form. So it's quite a broad topic, and which also makes it a bit difficult because it will be very variable regionally, as we can see in this next slide. So here it is. The state of food security at the moment, this is a few years old, was measured with a global food security index. Basically, it relates with the amount, quality, and nutrition we were talking about, and safety as well. Recently, it has become a really big issue in different parts of the world. In the past, it used to be quantity, which was the biggest demand. For example, you might talk about sub-Saharan Africa not having enough harvest. But recently, there have been other concerns as well. For example, pollution in Southeast Asia. There would be also issues. We even have food insecurity in the developed world as well, because people are not able to have nutritious food. And, that means we have a huge amount of malnutrition globally, which means poor nutrition. And the consequences are, we have, undernourishment, underweight, but also we have the opposite, which is also another malnourishment, which is obesity and associated problems. So it has many different faces, but it is unfortunately not good for a big part of the world. And in this case, there is a big discrepancy, as we can see. Those which are in a better situation tend to be the global north, and those which are not doing well or need to improve tend to be in the global south. So there is also a regional and a global pattern of variation. Well, where does it put us to? And now we are trying to give an example of Malawi, a landlocked country shown in that small red circle, just in the heart of Africa. There is a long story how we worked with this project, but a series of fortunate incidents brought me together in my interest in agroforestry with a charity working there, which is also based in Bedford, which is not far from me. And that's how we got into it. But Malawi is a good example of sub-Saharan Africa, a landlocked country, fairly peaceful, but unfortunately it suffers from quite the common issues of lack of food security, and also changing storms, for example, climate, which means that recently they have had severe famine, and also they have had severe floods. So sometimes you end up on the receiving end of both. But you might ask, why macadamia? Now, these macadamia trees you see are next to the farmers, and in between you see some other crops being grown. In this case, it would have been maize. But this is an agroforestry scheme, which I'm going to explain in a bit. So Malawi is the 6th largest producer of macadamia nuts. Macadamia nuts are originally from Australia, actually, and they have been brought in and planted and are being used by the local farmers to as kind of food, because it is rich, it has oil, and it is eaten during the times where the grains are not there yet. So it's kind of a nice stopgap crop. And secondly, it is a high value crop. If you had seen the supermarkets, macadamia is probably among the most expensive nuts you can find. I think per kilo it probably is about 30 pounds or something. And for farmers, you can get 10 or 20 kilos per tree in shell, and with minimal management. And of course, it is, being a tree, it's much more resilient to floods, for example, or drought. And so it was introduced in Malawi from Australia, and it has been so successful. Malawi actually is the 6th largest producer globally, and the 2nd in Africa, just following South Africa. So it's a much more common crop than you think, and it is considered a retirement crop as well, because people plant it, and it keeps going on for about 20 years. So it's quite a valuable crop. So that is about macadamia. And this particular charity we work is Nano Macadamia Trust. It was introduced about 50 years ago by a few farmers who lived there. They introduced it because oranges were not doing that well, so they said, why not try macadamia? And it became successful. So there it is for you. Agroforestry is one of my favorite topics. Agroforestry generally means tree and crop combination. So in this case, in the trees are the macadamia nuts, and then next to them you can have the crops, which could be maize or groundnut, or peanuts, for example, which are grown commonly there. And sometimes people would have animals as well grazing, but that's not always common. Now, what that means is, I can tell you in Malawi's case, they can break torrential rains because of the interception by the trees, and they can provide shade because temperatures can be up to 10 degrees lower under the trees than exposed land. So it's actually protecting other plants as well, and windbreak as well. That's another benefit. So it has a lot of physical effects on the local climate. But also it has, of course, it has a well-noted effect on the water cycle as well, providing cover for water that comes in. And also it is useful for biodiversity because, lots of animals and plants find a place there as well, particularly with regards to pest management. Sometimes they break the environment or the pest invasion cycle. And of course, the soil nutrients are added, and it also helps in that way. So it's actually a system which has been going on for years and years in traditional knowledge with other trees, obviously. So it has such benefits, and it means, and it's often that the grain crop actually has a better yield in an agroforestry scheme than without. So looking globally, obviously it helps for food security. As I mentioned earlier, farmers eat them during the lean season before harvest, but also they can sell them as well, the nuts, which can provide alternative income. So we are actually addressing the food security, which is one of the global sustainable development goals. And of course, it's also protecting the soil from erosion and, supplying ecosystem services. So there is also another benefit which we can call as Sustainable Development Goals 13 and 15, which protects the environment. Of course, we may go also to human health as well. Apart from the food, it also helps in nutrition as well. And the shells of macadamia trees can be used as well for fuel. They can be burned. So it's kind of a wonder crop there. But there is a big challenge in any agroforestry scheme is how do you persuade people to plant the right tree in the right site? Now, even though macadamia is one species, I mean, there are two or three species actually naturally, but there are many cultivars. Some are suited to the hills, some are suited to the valleys, some are suited to poor soil. So that kind of understanding which is useful and where is a big issue. And of course, we have the other aspect of that as well, is how do we persuade people to plant macadamia trees or farmers? They need finance. I mean, the trees need to be got. There should be knowledge and it should be planted. So there is financing, it is an issue. So in all this, we are talking about smallholder level. So we are not talking about commercial farmers, smallholders. So actually the help comes directly to the farmer's family itself. And as much of the benefit comes to the farmers, not the middleman. So that is where Nano Macadamia Trust introduced a farmer empowerment scheme for data collection. Now, what I mean in this case is it relates with connecting farmers to within each other, like as a cooperative, and also with carbon traders who pay for them. So what it means is, for example, as you can see on the slide, on the box image on the left side of this, we have the cooperative, which is a farmer could be a member. And then on the right-hand side, we have carbon traders. Now, in this case, what Nano Macadamia Trust did, which is a facilitator, is people fly. For example, there are academics who fly for conferences. So as part of their carbon damage mitigation certificate, we can call it, they kind of pay for trees to be planted. Now, this is like carbon offsetting, but it's much more holistic because the facilitator, the trust, transfers this money to be planted into macadamia trees by the cooperative members. Now, where it becomes really beautiful is the transparency of it. So the money is coming as a payment for ecosystem services, but the farmers monitor the trees, and they value them because a living tree is much more valuable than a dead one. And the other thing is they monitor the annual yields and the nature of the growth, and the macadamia trusts in Bedford actually follows up. So any offsetting done is done for the right tree, and it is transparent and it is monitored throughout, because our colleague will introduce it, a mobile phone based recording scheme which records the size of tree, the cultivar, how much it has yielded every year. So there is kind of a clear trail of how much things are produced and how the tree is doing. So you can even calculate how much carbon is sequestered. So it kind of assures those who are supporting as carbon offsetters, that it is still thriving and providing income. And also it supports the farmers to keep building and also alleviates their livelihood. So that is the whole scheme, how it's working. And on the right side, you can see on the website of the Nano Macadamia Trust, there is a way to calculate one's carbon footprint, and then it allows you to pay, which can then be transferred to the cooperative. So I think the success of the story is there are 5,000 of farmers who are in this cooperative, and we have quite a large number of trees planted and being followed up. On average, farmers have probably 20 trees. Some have more, some have less. And of course, it's owned by women and men, so it's quite comprehensive. And the whole scheme has been helping food security and economic progress. And yes, what we learned so far, this is an example of the cooperative head, Mr. Mkangala. He is next to a macadamia tree and in a crop of maize, where they are monitoring the yields for that particular year and the size of tree. So it has multiple benefits. It has been benefiting quite a lot of the farmers, and it has strengthened the cooperatives because the cooperative produces knowledge which farmers, and skilling them, because that's a huge demand now. Especially macadamia is becoming popular as a replacement cash crop for tobacco, which used to be one of the big cash crops in Malawi. And they also run training schemes on how to dry the nuts so that they don't develop aflatoxin challenge. So the financing mechanism is having a lot of benefits to the farmers. And yeah, occasionally there are a lot of other charities that get involved in this scheme as well. But overall, it's doing its little bit at local level to support farmers. And we hope, and we have been trying to upscale it at national level instead of regional district, but going further. And the data which is being collected has been useful, and we have already some idea about which cultivar works, which side of the country, and how popular it is. So there is a lot more research going on as well as a result of this collected data through farmer empowerment. So that is it for me. Happy to take any questions. And I hope you found it interesting, but please visit the website of Nano Macadamia Trust, which links with the Open University and our colleagues in Africa.